everybody. My name's Councillor Charlie McCurby, the leader of the council. Can I welcome everyone to today's meeting, which is a hybrid meeting. The meeting will be live streamed and recorded and will be available for viewing after the meeting. Should the live streaming fail, the meeting will continue and a recording will be available through the council's website following the conclusion of the meeting. Can I remind members that translation facilities are available, and for those attending on Zoom, to choose your language of choice. For those wishing to speak in the chamber, please raise your hand. For those on Zoom, please use the raise hand function. We will alternate between speakers in the chamber and on Zoom. For those attending remotely, please note that those in the chamber will be unable to use the chat facility. And if possible, Zoom attendees are required to leave their cameras on at all times. So we'll move on to agenda item 1, which is apologies for absence. Shan?
One apology received from Councillor Gronwy Edwards.
Okay, thank you. Agenda item 2 is declarations of interest, code of local government conduct. Members are reminded they must declare the existence and nature of the declared personal interest. Would any members like to declare an interest? No. Agenda item 3 is urgent matters. I'm not aware of any. Ewan's shaking. Sorry, Councillor Penny, apologies.
Do I need to declare that I actually run a food bank and started a food bank in Lamrecken with the item on the agenda?
3.
Yes, I think you need to declare the fact that you do that. If there is a specific mention of granting funds to that specific food bank, well, clearly you'd need to, it's a prejudicial interest and you'd need to leave. If it's just a general discussion about food banks, I guess you're okay about that.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, Penny, thanks for that. So we've established there's no urgent matters. So agenda item 4 is minutes of Cabinet to approve and sign as a correct record the minutes of the previous meeting, which is on pages 4 to 9. If members, I'm sure you've had a good chance to read those. If any questions arise from that, if not, would somebody prepare to propose them as a true record? Councillor Aaron, Jeff, you can second it. Okay, thank you. So agenda item 5 is announcement by the leader. So you'll all know Claire Higgins, our head of integrated adults and community services. So she's reached a really important milestone of 25 years of working really diligently for this council. She worked her way through the ranks and she's been a head of service for the last 10 years. And she's made a really fantastic contribution to the leadership of social care in and across this whole council. Sadly, she's moving on to pastures new within the private sector in Gwynedd, but I'm sure we all want to wish her all the best and thank her for her exemplary services over the years. The Senior Employment Committee is meeting on Thursday. I'm pleased to say we've got 3 really strong candidates coming forward, so there'll be big boots to fill, but I'm confident we can get someone of her calibre to take on that really important role. On a slightly lighter note, I'm sure members will have enjoyed Wales's historic victory over South Africa last Saturday. But a local lad from Bottlewithin, Sam Wainwright, came on in the last sort of 10 minutes. He actually was integral in winning the penalty at the scrum, which actually led to the score and try. So he spent his juniors section at Rill Rugby Club and then graduated on the RGC. So it's really fantastic to see a local boy make an impact like that against the world champions. And I hopefully look forward to seeing him next week. So that's it from me. I'll move over to any announcements by the Chief Executive. Okay, so agenda item 7 is to review the forward work programme. That's on pages 10 to 42. Do we have any comments members would like to make, or are we happy just to accept that? We just show that we're happy to accept that. Okay, do you all? Agenda item 8 sits in my portfolio. It's the UK Shared Prosperity Fund Regional Investment Plan. So it's on pages 43 to 50. So we go to page 43 in 1.1. There's an explanation here about what the Shared Prosperity Fund is. Essentially, it's £2.6 billion of investment until March 2025 across the UK. This is the third funding stream that's been brought along to replace European funding. We had the Community Renewal Scheme that we successfully applied to, for the Levelling Up Fund, where we put in bids of £60 million. And once again, it's been a huge amount of work for our officers to bring this forward. They've had a very challenging 16-week timetable at the same time as they were looking to develop these other bids. But if we take you to page 45, 3.5, it spells out what this actually means for Conwy. So you'll see there's a core SPF of just over 20 million. And then there's a scheme called Multiply, which is 4.2 million. 3.6 gives some more detail and multiply. It's essentially a UK government initiative to boost adult numeracy. Still some work to be done there between Welsh government and UK government in terms of how that will move forward. So for us, I want to focus on the core SPF, which is £20 million. We have that to spend over 3 years. It is amount that's allocated to the county, but in order to access it, we have to submit a plan. There are 3 main themes within that. There's communities in place, support for business, people and skills. There's a bit of work to be done there at what level that's best developed. I think communities in place clearly is something we will deliver in Conwy. For the other 2, some of it we will deliver here, but some of it is better done at a regional level. We've got really good relationships with our further education colleges who can develop this in a pan-North Wales manner. So we need to look at that, and that's part of the framework moving forward. Really important to point out that there's no decisions made about where we actually spend this money in the schemes we spend it on. We've submitted a broad range of themes that we can spend it on. But when it comes to the nuts and bolts of actually spending it, there's a real role there for every member to put forward schemes within their wards that can be a real benefit to our communities. So the scrutiny had a really good conversation. Discussed this at the last meeting, and they supported the recommendations, and those are on page 44. So we're actually looking at 2.2, 2.2, 3, and 2.4. Sorry. So I'm happy to take any questions, and then if nobody else wants to, I'm happy to move those recommendations as on there. Okay, thank you. Okay, Councillor Louise.
Good afternoon, Cabinet, and good afternoon, Leader. I know time has been very short in this, but the engagement to come, is it, with sort of local stakeholders and businesses and people? That's going to happen between now and the 1st of August? Thanks.
So the report does outline some of the consultation that's happened at the moment, Louise, but there clearly will need to be more when we actually finalise the plan. So it's been difficult in the timescale available. But I don't know, are there any officers here who'd like to answer that further? I don't know, is Barbara here?
Charlie, I'm here if that would help. Jane Richardson speaking.
Oh, thank you, Jane. Yes, please.
Jane Richardson, Strategic Director for Economy in Place. Thank you for the question, Councillor Louise. To do a dedicated consultation for shared prosperity was not possible in the timescale we had to develop the themes for the bid. So all we've done at the moment is develop the themes, basically the buckets of activity that this could fund. And what we did for that is we had extensive consultation with private sector, third sector, public sector and communities around developing the regional economic framework. And if you remember, that was undertaken over a period of weeks and months towards the latter end of last year and the start of this year. So we used that consultation and that public feedback to inform the priority themes for the shared prosperity. And then what we will do is, once we have hopefully got confirmation of the funding allocation for the county, we will then do a more detailed consultation about specific projects in the autumn. So we're not proposing additional consultation between now and 1st of August. There's nothing that we could do in that time scale that would be meaningful, but we will be consulting on the specifics of projects once we're into the next phase of this whole scheme, which will be at that project level through the autumn into the winter. And that would then inform the spend on shared prosperity, which would start in the new financial year, so from 2023 into 2024. And hope that makes sense.
Yes, thanks. That makes sense now. When I said regional workshops, I get that, the ones that happened last year. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Louise. Conor, Aaron.
Diolch, Charlie.
Thank you, Charlie. In 2.4, it asks us to approve the authority to be a lead in terms of the fund regionally. Is there more discussions regarding which authority will be that lead authority?
Okay, Diolch, Aaron. I did omit to discuss that. Jane, could I bring you back in just to give members an update as to where we're up to with those discussions, please?
Yes, so you had to have a lead authority in order to be able to submit the regional bid. And because Gwynedd already have all the mechanics set up to act as a lead authority, that in effect, they perform that role for North Wales within the Economic Ambition Board. So they almost act like the regional bank from governments and then helping to allocate that through to the projects. So
Sorry, Jane, sorry, you're very warped. Would you mind me trying your video off, please?
Apologies, members. Sorry, is that any clearer, Charlie?
Yeah, that's much better, thanks.
Yes, so because Gwynedd already acted as the banker for the Economic Ambition Board, taking the money from the two governments and then allowing that to flow through to projects, the quickest solution for us in North Wales was to do the same for the Shared Prosperity Fund. So as a temporary arrangement, it was agreed that Gwynedd would be identified as the lead authority, and that went down in our initial paperwork. We left the door open for other councils to submit an interest to say if they wanted to take that role on a more permanent basis. At the moment, no other council has expressed an interest to do that, partially because it comes with requirements around legal and financial monitoring that the other councils haven't got in place, whereas Gwynedd have them in place. So if a council like Conway were to go for it, we would have to recruit additional staff to do that, which of course takes time, etc. So I think the most likely outcome is that Gwynedd will perform that role, but it hasn't been formally agreed or decided, and the leaders, I'm sure, will be having further discussions about that in the coming weeks.
Okay, Aaron. And I think as Jane highlighted, that there are concerns about the ability to recruit, but what's key for me is we want our schemes in Conway to be us deciding how they're run, and Gwynedd to be the banker who signs the check. But you know, it's that locality that we need to capture. But there will be further discussions as to the pros and cons moving forward. Ewan, do you want to come in that?
Yes, I think that's really helpful. But for the sake of this particular resolution, I think we need some wording to recognise that it's anticipated that Gwynedd will take on that role, at least in the time being.
Okay, members. So, Freen, we can leave you to.
I think that it's fine to say that that the cabinet approve Gwynedd provisionally as the lead authority. If that changes subsequently, well, we'll need to bring it back, won't we? But we can provisionally say that they will be the lead authority. We need the lead, don't we, in order for the investment plan to be submitted. So that makes sense.
Okay, Jeff, did you want to come in there?
Have we asked Gwynedd and have they accepted, you know, that they take on that task?
Yes, there have been discussions amongst some of the chief executives of the 6 North Wales authorities. Gwynedd are prepared to carry on that basis, and certainly as far as I was aware before going away, that the other 5 authorities were comfortable with that as well.
Okay, thank you. So do we have any other questions on this topic? No. So if I can bring you back to the recommendations with the amendment that Gwynedd will be hosting it. I'm happy to propose them. Is anybody prepared to second them? Councillor Mike. So can we all vote if we're in favour, please? Okay, thank you very much. So we'll move on to agenda item 9, which sits within the education portfolio. It's to start the statutory process of determining the possible closure of Ysgol Llanefydd. Over to the cabinet member, Councillor Julie. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, so as the Leader has just said, this is Ysgol Llanefydd. The report I'm presenting to you also consists of 4 appendices. You'll find in Appendix 1 a detailed report of the information to date, Appendix 2 a site plan and school catchment area, Appendix 3 identifying and exploring alternatives to closure, and Appendix 4 the equality impact assessment as well. Before taking you through the report, I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank the school staff and the community, governors, everybody who's been involved with regards to their input and professionalism on this matter to date. So the proposal of any school closure is obviously a highly contentious issue, and it isn't a matter that is treated lightly. We will continue to liaise closely with stakeholders throughout this process, as we have been doing thus far. The purpose of the report is to seek Cabinet approval to start the formal process of closing Ysgol Llanefydd. This final decision on school closure is to be made by the Cabinet once the statutory consultation has been completed and sufficient evidence has been collated. This proposal report provides the Cabinet with information to assist them in deciding if they should proceed with the proposal to close Ysgol Llanefydd. Any formal proposal would be set out and published in the form of a public statutory notice. The Council has powers to propose expansions or closures of schools. If proposals are published, then follows a statutory 28-day period during which further representations and formal objections can be made. This provides everyone with the opportunity to have their say as part of the consultation process. The school organisational code identifies a list of stakeholders that we must engage with. And that's happening and will happen. Conway Education Improvement Team have worked with the governing body on supporting the vision of the school with a site visit and programme of actions, including links for media support, and liaised with GWER on ensuring that the standards were appropriate to support promoting increased pupil numbers, and I've been a part of that process over the years as well. A number of reasonable alternatives had been identified and explored and given careful consideration of their merits and viability before deciding on this proposal. The school and alternatives to closure have been considered, but not just from an educational perspective, but across the full range of the local authorities' responsibilities. Ysgol Llanefydd has a capacity to accommodate 78 pupils, but currently there are 0 pupils at the school. And this is something that's been a natural process that's happened over a number of years, really. I hope that this provides you with a brief overview of the report. And just to reiterate, the purpose of the report is to start the statutory process of determining the possible closure of Ysgol Llanefydd. And if I take you to page 52 of the report, the recommendation that Cabinet gives the authorisation for education services and legal service officers to start the formal process of closing Ysgol Llanefydd by the 31st of December 2022 by issuing a notice of closure. This may need to be amended to the 31st of March 2023, subject to required staff notice periods. Lowry is on online. Should there be any additional questions, or I'll try to answer, Leader. Thank you.
Okay, Julie. Any members like to raise any questions, observations or comments? I think Mike just beat you to it.
Yeah, I think, you know, this is just the start of a process. It's such a shame to see a rural school with no pupils in attendance. So it's as I say, it's a part of the process, and I'm happy to second the recommendation by Councillor Julie.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Councillor Chris.
Yeah, so just to follow on from Councillor Mike, there are currently no community groups that use the school. That's what I looked at straight away to see in the report. You know, that Ysgol Llanefydd doesn't have any Cylchmaithrin or after school club or anything like that. So it's not as if the school is vital for community use. So yeah, I'm happy to support Councillor Julie.
Okay, any other members like to comment? No. So we've had a proposer and a seconder. Members indicate that they're in favour of the proposal to start the process. Okay, thank you very much. So 9.2 is still within the education portfolio. So it's the Local Authority and Schools Partnership Agreement from 2021 to 2024, and members will find that on pages 69 to 104. So back to you, Julie.
Thank you, and apologies, I'm struggling with my IT. I've got some things that are working on my laptop, some things are working on my iPad, so I'll sort of try and muddle through. Okay, so as has been said, this is the partnership agreement, is a document which is being amended and updated, which outlines important information about how we as a council work in partnership with our schools, supports the working and maintains it and improves it. Education remains a priority for the local authority, and this policy document is another step towards ensuring the best for our children and young people. It outlines the process for the working practices of schools, governors, the regional school improvement service, which we all know as GWER, and council officers, so that there is more transparency and trust between us. Education continues to develop successfully in the county, and we are committed to strengthening the local authorities' partnership with our schools. Section 197 of the Education Act 2002 and Regulation 4 of the Maintained Schools Partnerships Agreement require local authorities to draw up a partnership agreement with the governing body of each school maintained by the local authority. It is reviewed at least every 3 years, and this is the third partnership agreement we have reviewed in order to reflect the developments and reforms in education in Wales. And obviously we're all aware that we've got the new curriculum coming in, and this is probably more important than ever. So the agreement based on the principles that the main aim of the local authority and the school is to raise standards and use self-evaluation in order to seek continuous improvement. Head teachers and governing bodies are primarily responsible for standards, and the role of the LA is to support schools and challenge them to improve. The local authority recognises the importance of self-governance for schools. Schools are responsible for their own performance and should be free to make their own decisions. Each school should decide what needs to be done to raise standards and then act accordingly. So the main changes to the policy document that you'll see in the report can be seen in the full agreement attached to the report, but for ease, we have changes to the reforms and the Welsh Government's National Support Mission updated in October 2020 to include the 4 purposes, which is part of the new curriculum. So the 4 purposes are to support all young people to become ambitious, capable learners who are ready to learn throughout their lives, enterprising, creative contributors who are ready to play a full part in life and work, ethical, informed citizens who are ready to be citizens of Wales and the world, and healthy, confident individuals who are ready to live life realising their aspirations as valuable members of society. So really great aims that we have there that sit within this. The Renew and Reform agenda, supporting learners' wellbeing and progression in response to the impact of COVID-19 on learners and learning. Schools and settings are supported to tackle the key challenges identified by the Welsh Government. Support monitoring, challenge and intervention processes in schools. So the introduction of a holistic 360 support plan for schools requiring additional support, set and agreeing targets for progress and well-being. So changes following the performance targets and schools absence regulations 2011 being revoked in 2020 mean that schools no longer required to set and publish targets. So this will need to be reviewed when further guidance is available from Welsh Government. So obviously we've seen massive changes due to COVID in terms of attendance and different things in schools. So it's just about monitoring that moving forward. Welsh and Education Strategic Plan, the West that we've discussed many times. The LA has a statutory duty to prepare and present the Welsh and Education Strategic Plan to the Welsh Government and outline how we intend to achieve the Welsh Government's aims and targets to set in the Welsh Medium Education Strategy to the Welsh Government's vision of 1 million speakers by 2050. And the provision for children and young people with additional learning needs obviously sits in here as well, and changes in order to reflect the new duties, again, that we've discussed many times in the new Additional Learning Needs and Education Tribunal Act of 2018. We've had consultation regarding the revised agreement with partners and key stakeholders, the regional consortia, local authority officers, Cabinet Member for Education, myself, obviously, as strategic heads, primary and secondary and special. We've discussed with the unions, the diocese, and the chairman of the Governors Association. So therefore, the aim of the partnership agreement is to ensure continuous collaboration for Conway with the governing bodies, with schools, with the regional consortia, to ensure that the improvement is fair, good quality and consistent education for all learners here in Conway. And if I take you to the recommendation, which is on page 70, that Cabinet approves the revised partnership agreement and authorises the Head of Education Services to execute and complete the agreement on the behalf of Council. Sorry, I know that was a bit long-winded, but I thought it was important to just highlight some of the changes there. Thank you, Leader.
No, thank you, Julie. It's a very complex and important document, so thanks for taking the time to go through it so thoroughly. Any questions, members? Councillor Liz.
Thank you. Will this be going back to scrutiny at all to see how well it progresses? Because we're asking a lot of schools and the governing bodies here. So I just wondered whether it might be going back to scrutiny at all.
Sorry, to come leader. Yeah, there will be updates. I think Lori's raised her hand there of many kinds that will address this really over the scrutiny period. I'll let Lori come in whether we reflect on this every 3 years, whether we update specifically on the partnership agreement or whether we address it using other scrutiny reports. Lori, I don't know if you want to come in.
Yeah, diolch, Councillor Liz, a question. So the term of the partnership agreement will of course be 3 years. So in 3 years' time, we'll undertake a review of the actual document to make sure that it does reflect any changes in national reform and also to reflect any legislative changes. That's been the intention insofar that it is to reflect the curricular reform, the changes in terms of the Welsh language and also the ALN legislation. So this will be a signed document now that governors, local authority and GWE obviously sign up to, and it will run the 3 years. So it'll be at the end of the 3 years, Councillor Liz, that we will bring it back with any amendments. And of course, we will consult with schools throughout that 3-year period as well, so that it really is a live document and we can get feedback as well on whether the contents are fit for purpose or whether we need to think of additions or any alternatives.
I'll bring the Chief Executive in, please.
Thanks, Leader, and thanks, Councillor Julie, for presenting the report. This is a really important document, isn't it? The partnership between us, schools and GWE and the governing bodies. But it's important in terms of governance and clarity of our arrangements. I think probably what's more important is the quality of the relationship between us and those important people. And as you know, Leader and Councillor Julie, over the last 2.5 years or so, I think we've improved the quality of those relationships. And one element of which is our regular meetings with representatives of head teachers and special school and the pupil referral unit. In fact, I think we've got one later this week, which has given us, them and us, an opportunity to share the issues that are presenting to us and on the horizon. And I think it's given that opportunity for those representatives to raise with us issues that they wouldn't necessarily have had that platform to do. So I think it's a very important document, very glad it's here, very glad it had support from scrutiny, but of more importance probably that those personal relationships that we've built up over Teams meetings. Actually, I don't think we'd have managed to get them in otherwise because of people's busy diaries. So that there is a place for those going forward, isn't there? Thank you.
I entirely agree, Ewan. Any other members like to comment or any questions? No. So, Julie, have you proposed that recommendation? Would somebody be kind enough to second it? Councillor Liz. Could members show if they're in favour, please? Okay, fantastic. So we'll move on to agenda item 10, part 1, which is in the finance, revenue and benefits portfolio. So it's the capital programme 2022 outturn position, and you'll find that report on 105 to 127, and we'll go over to Councillor Mike, the portfolio.
Thank you very much, Leader. I'll trot through this, the first 2 reports, because this capital programme went through scrutiny, I think last week, Monday. got a good hearing, and I believe we will be going to council with this on this coming Thursday as well. But I'll just pick out some headlines on here. So basically, the capital programme, the outturn position, this report's containing information regarding the outturn for 2021 to 2022, which has previously been approved by members during the financial year. Basically, that's an ongoing process. We bring the capital programme through different areas. What I will say is I am asking for council on Thursday that the presentation that we received at scrutiny, which I found very useful, especially for new members. Sandra Forrest, unfortunately, is not here, and I know our strategic director, Amanda, has kindly stepped forward to present to council. There's about 4 slides on information, which I think is going to be, very useful for new members. That's the feedback I got from the members at the scrutiny. So basically, this is an ongoing process. The capital programme was 96. Just under 97 million, which was profiled between planned activity between 2021 and future activities taking it forward. So basically the actual expenditure was just over 42 million, which was less, about $1 million less than the revised programme, which was expected to be spent in 2021-22. So as a result of the variances and concluding the capital outturn position, it is requested that we ask for 63.45 million to be carried forward into 2022's programme. It's worth noting that we've actually spent, and I have to flick between two because I, along with Councillor Julie, have had IT problems, so I'm flicking between IT and my trusty notepad. So as a result of that, we've actually spent over the year 42 million on our capital programme. I've got some of the schemes that we've worked on, but I won't go through them. There's also, going into the future, leader, I think that scrutiny, what we picked up was there were concerns about capital programmes when we do sort of make variations and take them forward into the future for various reasons, about the cost of material, energy, fuel. And if you've got a project worth 1 million today, is it going to be worth a project of 1 million tomorrow? So I know I've spoken to our strategic director, and there's a piece of work that I think we need to be looking at that going into the future. So basically, Table 1 details the variations throughout the year that have been revised in the capital programme that were approved in February 21, and that table is on page 108. A number of schemes totaling 10.4, just under 10.5 million, which had originally been anticipated to be spent in 21, have now slipped in terms of time frame, and they're the ones that we're looking to reprofile to 22, 23. In the same vein, it's worth noting that schemes totaling just under $500,000, which had originally been profiled for next year, have actually been able to be completed in this last year. We received some additional grant, a substantial amount of grant actually, during the year, which is basically towards, I think the bulk of the addition to funding relates to the coastal project in Old Colwyn, the splash point, which was about 9.13 million, and I think they're spending that as we speak. So basically, all the information, leader, is there for you to go through on in the different appendices. I would like to say that in the member engagement consultation, it was too late to take out is 2 quotes from me for a different report. I'd like to be on this report, the second paragraph, which is basically, I note the information contained in this report, which has been reviewed throughout the financial year. And obviously, as I've said earlier, there'll be continuous reviewing of the capital programme, and more so, especially with the issue of costs going up. I have suggested to Amanda, and I wondered, and I'm quite happy to listen to the views around the table today, whether some of the projects should be form part of our service performance reviews. Anything that's perhaps a little bit contentious, that then members could really get their teeth into on that. So really, Leader, all the information's there in front of you for the capital report outcome. The recommendations are, if you bear with me, on page, where are we? Go to recommendations, which are, thank you there. That's why you're there, Leader. Yeah, page 106. As I said, my comments were too late to be taken out of this report. I've asked for the presentation at council. Basically, we're looking here, and I think it's similar to what we discussed in scrutiny. So basically, the recommendations are page 106, 2.2, 2.3, Leader. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Anybody have any questions? Any comments? I think we all know the challenges faced in the construction industry and supply chain and just getting staff. So I think it's actually, to me, pretty remarkable that we've managed to spend the money we have. I do take on board the need to try and complete these projects as quickly as possible for obvious reasons, but it is a concern, the increase in price. I guess where there's availability to do that, might be able to pre-purchase some materials, but clearly that's difficulty with storage and stuff. But an ongoing challenge, but one I'm sure we'll rise to meet. So, Mike, you've proposed the recommendations.
Yeah, I propose the recommendations. It's going to council, and as I said, I just thought that presentation we had, unfortunately Sandra's off, so that will Amanda will kindly do that for us. It's just, you know, it's one of them reports where the facts and figures speak for themselves. It's all in the detail, and you know, as I say, I've just presented it as it is.
Okay, thank you. Well, if you've proposed them, I'm happy to second them. Can members indicate if they're in favour, please? Okay, thank you very much. So we're going to stick with you, Michael, to do financial outturn.
Okay, so the financial outturn. This is providing information for members for the outturn position for council again for 21-22, which will be reflected in the draft statement of accounts. I think it's fair to say that council has received significant support from Welsh government, and I have to say UK government therein as well. Some of which was received late, and that can be shown in Appendix 1. I'll go to that shortly. So basically, the outturn for 21-22 is more favourable for us, Leader, than previously reported. So basically, financial resources, we've applied these to the reserves and balances as of 31st of March. Budgetary risks facing during 22-23 and beyond. So basically, it's worth noting that Wales Audit Office, I've always had concerns for Conway regarding our reserves, and I think it's absolutely prudent that we add to the reserves, especially in the times that we're living at the moment. So we'll be increasing the reserves by 15 million as of the 31st of March. And as I say, that's largely to a consequence of the additional grant funding to our services and our schools. I've just put a couple of notes on here. I'll come back to, I think there's a bit of a typo in the recommendations, which I'll come back to. So basically, our reserves and balances, we will have future meetings, and again, we do annually to discuss, obviously, the budgets going forward. We have to produce our statement of accounts, basically signed by the Section 151 officer by the 31st of May. But as a result of the pandemic this year, we've been allowed to have a little bit of a cushion there. And basically, Wales government has said that, you know, we've got up till the 31st of August. Conway has taken advantage of this, and the flexibility of the accounts we expect to be signed by early July. Appendix 1 sets out the final outturn position for 2021, which I'll go to shortly. And column 5, especially in Appendix 1, will tell you the difference and the variances between the actual outturn and the latest revised budget. Yeah, happy to discuss that as we go through. This outturn position has improved as reported in February as I say, particularly as the additional grant money. So table 1 will show, if you have a look at table 1 on page 131, that tells you of the additional grant that Conway received. Grateful that we are for receiving this additional funding, but it also tells you, shows you the dates that we received it, March and early April. We've received £4.8 million, and that has helped us immensely. I think it's worth saying it's evident without the additional funding. If you look on table 2 with all the hardship funding that we've received, it's evident without this additional funding. I think Conway, I hate to think where Conway would have been if it wasn't for this additional funding. And when I say Conway, I mean Conway businesses and Conway residents. So again, I've got something I'd like to read out that I can give to the clerk regarding gratitude for the support from the governments. So basically, where am I? Our total reserves and balances as of 31st of March are just over £41 million. That's up to 26.2 million. The reserves and balances are included in Appendix 2. Members will need to review and consider repurposing our reserves again, which we will do throughout the year. And another ask that I've had, a conversation that I've had with our strategic director, is that we look to set up again, resurrect, if you like, the budget forum group. Again, there's some big pressures coming. I think it's part of finance scrutiny committee. I'm happy, to attend that, and if I'll put an invite out to members if they want to join that team. I'm happy to say that Amanda and another officer will help us administer and shape that committee. So there'll be some officer support there going forward. I think personally involving members and taking the ideas on board is paramount, taking forward for our budget for next year. Basically, yeah, again, Leader, all the information's there, especially if you want to go to Appendix 1, where it'll show you where the money's come from. Appendix 2 is where our reserves and balances are as of the moment. I'll stop there for the moment, Leader, if that's okay, just if anybody wants to ask any questions. And then I just want to read something briefly out, if that's okay.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Members, got any questions, queries, comments? Julie.
Yeah, just to say that, I think it's a sensible approach to take. I think the budget forums, bringing them back is a really good idea. I think we're, year on year, we think things are as bad as they're going to get. And then I think, obviously, with the climate nationally, for residents and for the local authority as well, we need to, as many minds together that can kind of find an approach that will hopefully be the least worst option. Seems to make absolute sense. And I think you were one of the people that set them up in the first place, Mike, weren't you, years ago?
Years ago.
And yeah, I've always found them incredibly useful. And I think with new members as well, I think it's a really good way for them to get an insight into how things work. And especially if you're concentrating on one area, it's really helpful to see the sort of bigger picture, isn't it? So yeah, just wanted to say, really support that approach that you're taking. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Julie. I think we've got Councillor Nigel Smith in the ether sphere somewhere. Nigel.
Sorry, Leader, I was having an IT button issue there. Yeah, thanks for the report, Mike. Just on the reserves, I mean, I'm really pleased to see that our reserves are growing, although marginally. I've signed in a couple of, or a number of SPRs in the recent couple of weeks, and one of the themes that seems to be coming out in those SPRs is the lack of capacity. Apologies. The fact that our departments have basically, staffing has been cut back to the bone. Will we be keeping an eye on that, or are we keeping an eye on that? And if we do have any additional funding, available, we'll be looking at increasing our officers so that they can crack on with the work on behalf of our residents.
I think you'll be pleased, Nigel, to see another report I'll be presenting shortly that hopefully will be giving our strategic director capacity to look at all these big issues that are coming down the line at us. And I can't speak for Councillor Chris Cater, but I know there's some work going on there and looking at vacancies. I don't want to put Chris on the spot at the moment. Basically, all the reserves are on in Appendix 2. I'm very mindful of staff and the pressure that's on staff. Some are doing 2 jobs or doing a day job and a part of others. But I think Chris Cater on HR could possibly say a little bit more on that. I'm sorry for that hospital pass. I could see Amanda wants to come in. Sorry for that hospital pass, Chris.
I'll bring Amanda in first, Chris, if that's okay, and then you can take the HR side. Amanda?
Thank you very much, Chair. Just for the recording, just to note that I'm Amanda Hughes, the Strategic Director of Finance and Resources. Just really to observe that obviously most services are holding service reserves set aside for a range of purposes, and obviously a report we're coming back to the August meeting with providing a bit more detail in relation to that. But to the extent that services hold those service reserves, I think they can clearly potentially use those for staffing to alleviate issues, notwithstanding obviously that it is one-off money, so they couldn't increase staffing on a permanent basis, but they might be able to use it for temporary pressures or short periods to help alleviate that situation. But as I say, the next report at the next committee will be detailing the purpose that services are holding reserves, and certainly a number of them are to do with supporting staffing to assist with pressures. So thank you.
Okay, thanks, Amanda. Bring Councillor Chris in, please.
Thank you, Leader. I do have to say, and I want to thank the finance team, because they're only a small team, and yet they have been able to claim and secure, these available Welsh Government grants and close the accounts in accordance with proper practices. Remember that. I mean, we have audit trails and so on. So I want to thank the team for that. As far as HR goes and a sustainable way of working going forwards, and our recruitment and retention problems. We have a recruitment project which is going on. We have vacancy control groups. We have these things in place, and it was very interesting at the HR and Corporate Improvement SBR yesterday. We went through a lot of these things, and for that team, there were 40 points going into their level of work. It's a massive amount of work there, but yes, I can assure members that we are looking at this very seriously. But yeah, that's as far as I'd like to go at this particular meeting. Thank you.
Okay, I'd also like to add my thanks to Amanda and her team. It's a huge amount of work, but I'd also like to add thanks to the Cabinet last year. We worked really, really hard on this. We were very lucky with the funding we got, but we could have spent that funding. We made some really tough decisions, and that's paid off. My stated aim when I took on the leadership was to leave this council in a financially better off position. And when I took it, because our reserves are being pitiful low, we took the decision to have a reasonably high level of council tax, which was necessary because of inflation. But we know the next couple of years are going to be tough. So it's important that we recognise the hard work that's gone on in the past. In terms of the employment, the principle of that budget was also that each service would be treated the same. They would have the same level of cuts because, again, some of the smaller services are really struggling in terms of the staff numbers we've got. But ultimately, we've been looked after well by Welsh Government, but we know the next couple of years are tough and that money will be needed. And it's always really important that we scrutinise every single line of every budget as we do to make sure it's the best use of that money. So thanks to Amanda on her team, and thanks to the former Cabinet last year. Do you want to back to you now, Mike, please?
Yeah. Did I leave my note on the table, Charlie? Because you've just said everything I wanted to say. I basically, yeah, I was going through. I do apologise for the reports. I set it all up on my iPad, and then it went awry. So I've got a PDF in front of me with some notes to back it up. So basically, what I would like to say is that I would like to thank the previous administration for all the work that they did during a difficult year, especially Brian Cossey. It has to be noted our appreciation also goes to all the services that have done a great Team Conway job, led by our senior team. I want to thank the UK and Welsh Government for their support. Without all this hard work and support, I dread to think where our businesses and residents would be right now. And I felt strongly about that, so I wrote that down. That I'd like to, perhaps have that minuted if that's okay. And I've got it there if that. If needed. So I thank Cabinet for the patience with me. So basically, if we go to the recommendations, which I've got this one, Ewan, I believe it's on 129. And basically 2.2, Cabinet accepts the report, which reflects our financial revenue outturn position for 21-22. Cabinet note the general balances, and I think the typos in. If Amanda can correct me if I'm right, it's on that last 2.3. It's got 15.024. I believe it should be 41.224. We're correct with that. So it may be in front of you. It's the document I've got is unfortunately there, and Cabinet review the reserves and balances in detail at a later meeting, and that's something perhaps our the budgetary working group can get its teeth into as well, and reports coming back throughout the year as they always do. I'd like to move them, Chair.
Okay, would anybody like to second those with the corrected figure? Councillor Chris just beat your penny, so can members show they're in favour, please? Michael. Okay, we'll move on to part 3 of this agenda item, which is discretionary cost of living support scheme, which is on pages 139 to 155. So back to you, Michael.
Thank you. On a bit of a run today. So this is basically a discretionary cost of living scheme. This is a discretionary scheme. This is on top of the scheme that we had, where households received £150 in the eligible that were eligible. So basically, I'll just go through some of the facts. In February 22, Welsh Government announced a package of measures to help people with the cost of living crisis. The main scheme, £150 payment, has gone out to eligible households. I have asked, we are waiting on, there is I'm not sure if there's a delay, but we're still waiting for the post office payment letters. If they've not gone out, and I may be updated, I've sent an email out this morning asking where we are on that, because there's still some to go out for those that didn't have bank accounts. It's fair to say there's been a little bit of pressure on me regarding that, but this team, as the amount of grant that this team has got out to residents and business is phenomenal, and I'm not going to criticise. My understanding is, and I'm sure Amanda will not update us, but possibly back what I'm saying, is that there's a company that we're using, and I believe other authorities using it, so it might be capacity for them. I'm not sure. So basically, this is the discretionary cost of living grant. Got a fantastic hearing in scrutiny last Monday. I'll just give you some background on it. So local authorities have to design their own package to give this discretionary cost of living support out. Conway has received about £960,000, and it's at our discretion how we implement that. Welsh Government has provided some information on how we should be using it, and I believe later on, I think the option that I prefer, I think aligns nicely with that. And the guidance from Welsh Government can be seen in Appendix 1. So as a reminder, the main scheme supported £150 to eligible households, council tax band A to D, and also this now discretionary scheme. We discussed it in scrutiny on a week Monday, and I think it's fair to say that option 2 did gain favour, but there was an issue. I'll just pick up the options for us now. So basically, all the options, if you like, cover an additional payment of £150 to households in receipt of exemptions, housing benefit cases, social sector properties, Band E, that's social sector, disability band reductions, and free school meals. So basically, we're going to give another payment out to those eligible of £150. And then there are some options. Option 2, which is preferred, is basically to support an additional £60 payment to residents, council tax recipients, housing benefit cases. But then the options come down to where we support, if you like, food banks, additional support to food banks. We are looking for discretionary housing grant capacity, whether it's in our services or citizen advice, for example. I can give an example of that, leader, where I've had a resident say to me, well, look, I live in a Band E property, but I'm cash poor. Now, I'm not sure whether £100 would possibly help them out. It'd be welcome, I can say that. But I just wondered that at that time, would it not be better for me then to signpost them to our benefits team? And if we can give the benefits team a bit of capacity for these people, and that resident may be eligible to far more than a one-off payment if meeting the criteria. So really, I'll open this up. Scrutiny. I've got an email which explains more about the summer scheme. Everything was backed by scrutiny except for the young people summer food scheme, which we were looking to put £20,000 in. It was voted, I think, 8-5 or 8-4, that money actually go on top of the £52,000 for the food banks. I have had some further information from Sarah Ecob regarding the food scheme, which, while you're having a debate, I can go get on my laptop. And looking at it, it seems a decent scheme that actually covers the whole county. And we're talking, I think at scrutiny, there were some concerns about rural communities and this grant. The summer scheme seems to hit all over the county. So I'm happy to open this up to discussion while I just draw up the email from Sarah, just to give you a bit of information on the summer scheme. Because as I say, I think it's worth supporting if once I share that email with you, leader.
Okay, thank you. Before I bring in members' questions or comments, I think it's important to note there is no perfect scheme, something like this. No. And this discretionary scheme was brought in to recognise the fact that paying payments to Band A to D is a very blunt instrument. That you may be very wealthy and live in a Band B house, you may be very poor and live in a Band E house. So there's no perfect system here. We could have been fairly lazy and just said we'll extend it to Band E, but I think that would have been the wrong thing to do. We've tried to come up to a scheme which targets the money to those most in need. I'm more than happy to discuss the different elements of that. We are really concerned that we do the maximum benefit for, sadly, what was relatively a fairly small amount of money. We all recognise the need for food banks, sadly. We'll all be aware of it in our wards, but I think I'm conscious as well there are people who are foregoing activities with their children to avoid going to food banks. So we've got to be conscious of that. It's not just everyone who turns up to a food bank. We need to try and support everyone who's struggling, really, because I think that's the real difference for this crisis. It's not the normal. It's hard to phrase this without sounding discriminatory, but there's lots of people falling into situations they never would have dreamed they were in through this pandemic and through the soaring costs. So we just need to be mindful of that. But that's enough from me. I'll see Councillor Aaron's got his hand up. Aaron.
Charlie.
Thank you, Charlie. Just before I raise the points that Mike raised about the capacity to provide advice and citizens' advice, I think it's right for us to express an interest because I sit on the Citizens' Advice Board in Conwy. I agree that option 2 is the best one. Maybe we need to relook at the £20,000 that goes to the summer food scheme. But I do think it's important that there is funding available for this scheme. And I think it's important that we as an authority are able to offer support to those young people who maybe feel that they can't attend the event that we held because they can't afford to come. So maybe we need to change the amounts, but I think it's important that we can offer something, some sort of support. Thank you.
Okay, Karen. Any other members like to comment? Councillor Emily.
Thank you, Chair. I think I was at the scrutiny committee when this was being discussed, and where that money goes as to if it goes into food banks or the summer food was there's quite a range of views within that. And as you said at the beginning, you know, there isn't a perfect solution to this. It's only a relatively small amount of money after it's been broken down as to how many people we can hit with this. I think, as Councillor Aaron said, that there is a kind of compromise in here, because we want to make sure that this is going to the people who are needing it most, and also to those children who their families can't afford their holidays, and they're maybe cutting back on other things in order to just keep them above that needing to use food bank level, and to try and encourage other families to go to some of these events that Conway's putting on. I know Mike will be reading out a bit more about what the summer food was and what it covers, but I was really pleased to see that it does cover some of the rural communities as well, because I think that within the conversations within scrutiny, that was one of the big concerns as to if it will cover the whole area properly and equally. But I think, you know, I mean, it makes me nervous that we're in a situation where we're openly, as a council and as government, funding food banks, because I don't, you know, we're a rich country, and it does make me nervous that we're just going, that they're so needed, that there's a recognition at this level that money's coming in, but they are, and that's what the times that we're in, sadly. So I think that we need to be funding the food banks as a whole, and supporting them where we can, but I think there might be a compromise that we can reach in regards to also putting some funding into the summer food scheme as well.
Okay, thanks, Emily. I've got Councillor Chris and Councillor Penny.
Can I just follow on from Councillor Emily regarding food banks? I'm very pleased that option 2 has got 52,500 for food banks. As we know, they're all individual. They rely on volunteers. Some of them cover very specific areas, others cover the whole county. Some provide delivery and so on. They've got different characteristics. So I'm sure we can rely on our officers to distribute this money fairly between them. I know there was some discussion at scrutiny whether some areas were better provided for than others, but I think our officers will be able to distribute this amount fairly, and I support that amount going there. As far as the young people summer food scheme, I do support some money going to that. I leave it to other members to actually come up with a figure.
Okay, Councillor Penny.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I'm really building on what Emily and Chris have both said. The food banks work extremely closely with officers at Conway Council. The advice that officers are able to give is invaluable. The emergency payments they make are invaluable to our families. Food banks know their community extremely well. We know them much better. I say we, as someone who runs a food bank, we know them much better than officers and possibly professionals within the community. I think food banks, it's essential now that the increase is there, the demand is there. I know certainly for certain food banks, they are open much longer hours. They are all run by volunteers who take no expenses whatsoever, and they are wanting the lives of youngsters to change for the better. and they see that any food parcel that's given is to promote the youngsters' diet, concentration. We know that children who go hungry to school aren't able to concentrate. I do think that the spit would be welcome. And I do see that food banks can play a major part in making sure there's a leaflet drop in each food parcel that goes out to all the families. And I know at present, food banks, there's a federation of food banks coming within the county where we're all working closely together for the same aims and purposes. So I would welcome the scheme, a split share. And I also welcome seeing officers around the community interacting with both town councillors and the residents, because they form a valuable link into what we as a council should be providing for our residents. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Penny. Councillor Liz.
Thank you, and thank you, Mike, for the report. I agree, we do need a compromise. And yes, food banks and the children both. I don't know whether we could share it, whether we halve it, or whether we give a contribution. But, you know, if so many children in poverty, children who don't have a proper meal, and I would like to see that we are supporting those families, because it was in the Daily Post today about poverty and the rise in poverty, and we have the poverty has risen in Conwy. So most definitely, I would like to see a fair contribution going to the summer school scheme as well as to the food banks, please.
Okay, just for bring Amanda in, I think it's worth looking at 2.3, because part of that is us delegating authority to the Strategic Director of Finance and Resources and the portfolio member to vary the exact payments to ensure that the funds are fully utilised. So there is a mechanism there where, you know, if that money's not needed, I'm sure it will be needed, that they could transfer it over. I think scrutiny's made very clear, and we've made very clear, that our concern is targeting the poorest. But I mean, sometimes we have to trust our officers at some stage where they've come up with this proposal. We've made our feelings known that we really want to make sure that this money is really targeted at those who can't afford these activities. For me, I think there's an element of trust there that they'll hear our voice, and that's what they'll look to do. But I'm just concerned that if we suddenly half the funding, there won't be money for some really good schemes that they wanted to bring on. So I'll bring Amanda in. She probably talks more sense than me. Amanda.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, sorry, just to draw attention, actually, and apologies that this wasn't in the report. So I've just become aware of it during the meeting. We have previously received funding from the WLGA specifically for food banks, and we are actually currently still sat on about £31,000 that we've had via that route, which we haven't yet distributed, which is nothing to do with this discretionary scheme. So I guess, given that we have got an additional 31,000 already for food banks, you know, and the proposal potentially is to obviously add the 52,000 to it, then that would be a substantial amount of money we would have available. And bear in mind that the discretionary scheme, we have to spend the money by the 31st of March. So, you know, there's a period over which we have to distribute it. So I guess with that in mind, I would perhaps ask really for permission in accordance with what you just said, Charlie, really, to exercise my discretion, along with Councillor Mike, obviously as a portfolio holder, to as you say, take on board the sentiments of what you're saying as cabinet, but to decide upon the exact amounts based on how much realistically we can usefully distribute to the food banks and for them to spend by the 31st of March, and also then to usefully spend some money via the summer food scheme. Thank you.
Okay, I've got Councillor Julie, Penny, then Emily. Julie.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that's good to know that additional funding is there. I think it makes sense to hand it over to officers along with the cabinet member to make the appropriate decisions moving forward. You know, we've seen, haven't we, not just in the space of months or weeks, but days, often there are changes and demands out there, the increasing costs in areas that you wouldn't even imagine. So I think it's important that's there for them to make the appropriate decision for where that need is most in need of support, I guess. So yeah, I'm happy to propose supporting option 2 with that amount of discretion for the officer and cabinet member to make those decisions. I'm sure we'll get an update at some point in the future anyway. Thank you, Leader.
Thanks, Julie. Bring Councillor Penny in, and then Emily.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you all. Just for a figure to sit with, I never thought I'd be talking to Amanda about finances. Llanfairpwllgwyngyllgogerychwr Food Bank, our monthly shopping bill is £700 a month, just to meet the basic need, not emergencies. So that's just a figure for us all to take home tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Penny. Councillor Emily.
Just a clarification point from Amanda or Mike in regards to, so when have we got to have, with regards to it being the money being spent by March, is that from the council distributing it to where it's going by March, or is that the food banks or whoever it is that's spending it has to have it spent by then?
Perhaps I'll come in, Councillor Mike, if that's all right. I think it would be our spend. So I think if we distributed it to the food banks, then they don't necessarily have to have spent it. Having said that, I guess we do have to have regard for appropriate financial control to the extent that, you know, I don't think we should be pushing out massive advance payments to the food banks, if you know what I mean. I think it would be better to pay them, you know, drip feed the payments over the 8-month period, you know, so to the extent that they wouldn't have actually in the end spent the money, it would probably only be a small amount at the end, I would envisage.
Okay, so Mike, do you want to come back in?
Yeah, I think Amanda must have received the same email I just received regarding the WLGA, the additional funding for food banks. So I'm with Emily. It's a sad state that we're in, that we're supporting food banks, but we are where we are. And I think so basically just going with option 2 now, and I'll just quickly go through what I've had from Sarah regarding the summer scheme. Food banks are potentially going to be receiving £83,000, which is a substantial amount. And bearing in mind what Penny's just said about a weekly shop at £700, I think it's going to do a lot of good for it's going to do a lot of good for our most vulnerable residents, and declare an interest that I actually delivered the food parcels on behalf of Llanfairpwllgwyngyllgogerychwr Food Bank, and I know how well they are appreciated. So basically, Leader, the summer scheme, it's not just Venue Cymru as we thought it might have been. It's going to be what's called feed and read sessions at 10 libraries across the county, fusion creative arts, that's at 6 locations. And then you're going to have PE sessions at Porphyrius, disability PE sessions at Porphyrius, and a Lego cafe. There are flyers for each of these sessions, and I think it's a really good idea that if we can get them printed and we put them into the food parcels as a bit of literature for those that are receiving them. Basically, feed and read sessions are going to be in Colwyn Bay, Llandudno, Llanrwst, Conway, Abergele, Llanfairpwllgwyngyllgogerychwr, Penymawr, Kimmel Bay, Cerrig-y-Drudion and Penrhyn Bay. The fusion is Penmaen Rose, Kimmel Bay, Youth Sheds, Kimmel Bay, Cerrig-y-Drudion and Penmachno, and the Lego Cafe will be at Venue Cymru. For example, in the libraries, it'll be come and read a book and have a sandwich and a drink, and that's what the money will go for. I was happy. I didn't want to be in a position where we possibly went against scrutiny and risk a call-in, but I think with the information that we've had now that there's an additional £31,000, I think I'm more happy now than not going for the compromise and supporting the £20,000 to these schemes, and ask that Sarah and her team give us some feedback as to how them programmes have gone after the summer and how well they've been received, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mike. I am very respectful of scrutiny, and that was part of the reason why we've come away and looked for other reasons. I think the flexibility is important. I think the additional amount that's going into the food banks is important, and I think we made our opinions really strongly at scrutiny and here that we want to try and target this at the most poorest. The suggestions of having flyers at the food banks and stuff, I think is really important. And I know we've got the expertise to target those sort of hard to reach groups and get them there. So on that basis, Ewan, did you want to come in?
Thanks, Leader. Just a thought on the second resolution, which on page 140, 2.3, just taking the tone of the debate this afternoon, and you are supportive of option 2, clear, and then to giving some discretion to the strategic director with the portfolio holder. But the wording that's currently there says, if necessary, to ensure that the available funds are fully utilised. So, to make sure you use them all. I think the tone of what you're talking about this afternoon is that the funds. So the funds are fully and best utilised in order to ensure the available funding is used to support those most in need. I think that's a slight best. Yeah. Does that reflect? I think that reflects your discussion.
Yeah, I'm happy to accept that. Yeah, well, thank you.
Okay, yep, that seems very sensible and pragmatic. So we've had that proposed and we've had that seconded, have we? Oh, seconded. So can members show they're in favour of that, please? Good stuff. Thank you for a really good debate, and thanks Scrutiny for taking the time to discuss this at length. Well, and I hope you're happy with that as a sort of compromise solution. So we'll move on to part 4 of this, which is establishment of a head of finance. That's pages 156 to 159. Back to you again, Mike.
Okay, I'll get a glass of water after these reports. Yeah, so we're looking to establish a head of finance. So I'm not going to put names into the report. Basically, we've a current post, a head of accountancy, section 151 officers due to retire in September. And I think this is going to give us an opportunity to look at the staffing and the structure within accountancy and the wider finance team. So the proposal is to basically replace a head of accountancy with a head of finance and a deputy 151 officer. Basically, this will take an organisational lead in all aspects of finance, including revenues and benefits, and will give greater support to our strategic director. And I think it'll mirror other directors' reporting structures. So basically, again, I don't want to go too much into the work that Amanda's doing, but she's got a number of direct reports that are coming to her. And we've talked, haven't we, about all the stuff that's coming down the track on the cost of living. We're talking about increased costs on, thank you, Ian. Increased costs on capital projects, etc. And I basically would like to see our strategic director looking at the, what's coming at us and get on with that strategic role. So basically, the recommendations is to replace a head of accountancy with a head of finance. I'm sure Amanda would like to add something to this, but basically I think there's 5 operational heads that report to Amanda, and obviously that takes up his time. And I think it's fair to say that most, if not all, financial reports we receive are written by you. I think, yeah, so getting a nod. So I just think this will release some time that can go further and help us going into the future. As I say, again, I think I'll open it up. I've got going on costs. I think we can cover the costs basically with obviously the salary that's being paid at the moment, and then there is at most an additional cost of about £22,000. That, if I can explain it properly, can be covered by some staff can do an additional voluntary contribution into their pensions, and that's taken out at the top line, which reduces the need for us to pay national insurance. And I think out of those savings, we can afford to pay for this position. Also from that, I think basically it gives us a line management for looking at succession planning, because at the moment, I don't want to say we went outside for Amanda, you know, and I'm glad that you're there, really glad that you're there, but I'm starting to sound like Boris Johnson. I should stop. So basically, you know, it'll just tie in nicely with succession planning in the team, etc. And I really, in the short time I've been working with Amanda, it's I can see it's an intense role. It certainly is for me. And I'm always coming to you for the answers. So I'll open it up for debate, Chair.
Okay, we've got Emily. So Chris, I complained about his reflexes before, so he's gone first. We're gonna, sorry, Emily. Chris. We're just having a few issues with the microphone. If you could bear with us in the Zoom world, please.
Yeah, it's back.
Okay, so somebody muted everybody.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, if you have a look at an organisational chart of Conway of the authority, there is an anomaly here, and I fully support this new role of a head of finance, taking charge of revenue, benefits, income, in addition to accountancy. I think it's a very logical step, and I would, if Councillor Mike's made a proposal, I'd like to second that. Thank you, Mike.
Okay, Emily.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think we all know the huge amount of work that Amanda's doing at the moment, and given the cost of living crisis and everything else that's going on, I can't. Sorry, Amanda, I can't see that easing anytime soon. And yes, I just wanted to say I'm really supportive of that, and particularly with easing some pressures off the staff.
Okay, Yuan.
Just for the record, and just to point out at 5.1, the strategic leadership team, that's me and the directors and a couple of heads of service, we're fully supportive of this. Makes absolute sense to streamline the reporting arrangements, as Mike's pointed out. It mirrors then very much what we've got under the other strategic directors, leading things up.
Okay, anybody else like to comment? She does write excellent reports, though, Amanda. So yeah, but yeah, no, I'm fully supportive of this. So we've had a proposer, Mike, who seconded it, Chris. So if there's no other comments, members, can we show in favour? Fabulous. So Mike, you can have a little rest. We'll move on to agenda item 11, which is in democracy and governance portfolio, revised HR policies, Workwise 2020, pages 160 to 229, and over to Councillor Chris to talk us through this, please.
Thank you, Leader. Well, Cabinet's already approved the Workwise 2020 framework. So this report is actually about updating 4 HR policies which will support its implementation. These are listed in 1.6, and I'm just going to read out the 4. The flexible working policy, the flexi time policy, the permanent home working policy, and the performance improvement capability policy. The main amendments relate to the increased flexibility offered to staff, either in time or work location. If there are any particular queries pertaining to the nuts and bolts, Leanne Davis, I think and I hope, is there to answer them. Leanne's one of our HR officers. There she is. Very good. But I want to assure fellow Cabinet members that the changes have been developed after both extensive informal and formal consultations. These are covered in 3.1 and then in more detail in 5.1 to 5.3. The Welsh Government's green phase is when Workwise 2020 with the hybrid working model commenced, and this started last week on Monday, the 4th of July. So it is now important to have these support mechanisms in place. We're only at the start of what I'm sure will be a flexible framework with plenty of advantages. The immediate ones that come to mind are an improved work-life balance, increased meeting attendance, reduction in carbon emissions, and time saving. The whole framework has been subject to an equality impact assessment, and going forwards, we will monitor the results so that we know if and how it affects the high level of customer service in place already, and indeed how it affects the Team Conway corporate culture. Importantly, we'll have to see whether the increased flexibility actually improves staff recruitment and retention. So the recommendations are on page 161. Scrutiny has not proposed any changes, so I would like to propose that the amendments to the 4 policies are approved by Cabinet, and also 2 extra things: that the authority, as the authority gains more lived-in experience of hybrid working, there may need to be made minor adjustments to the policies, and that delegated authority be given to the head of corporate improvement and HR in consultation with myself as a relevant Cabinet member, so we can make minor amendments that require implementation. That's one thing. And the other thing is that changes to the policy will not be introduced without prior consultation with the trade unions recognised by the Council and the agreement of the head of corporate improvement and HR. So that's what I'd like to propose, Leader.
Great, brilliant, Chris. Thanks for taking us through that. Members, any questions or comments? Emily.
I'm happy to second.
Short and sweet. Any other questions or comments, members? No, Chris, you've done an excellent job there. You've stunned us all to silence. So Emily's proposed, sorry, Councillor Chris has proposed it. Emily's seconded. Can members show they're in favour of accepting this? Fantastic, thank you. So we'll move on to agenda item 12, exempt items, Local Government Act 1972, section 100A and Schedule 12I, access to information. To consider passing a resolution under provisions of section 100A4, the above act exclude the public and press from the meeting during consideration of the following item, and it is likely, if present, there would be disclosure to them of exempt information as defined in paragraph 14, part 4 of Schedule 12A to the Local Government Act 1972. So can members indicate they're happy to move into private session, please? Okay, so we'll just wait for the recording to stop.